I would like to thank you all for the round table today. And those in here many years know I like to tell stories, lots and lots of stories. I'm not going to start today with a story at all. I'm going to start today with a single word. A word that every single one of you know, use, is common. You've known it your whole entire life. And the word is apocatastasis.
All the time.
I want to see a show of hands. How many people know the word? Right. Apocatastasis means restitution, renewal, and recovery. The word first appeared in the New Testament, interesting enough, and was used to describe the resurrection of Christ. It again appeared in the pagan Bible. Still meant restitution, renewal, and recovery, but in this particular case, it's depicted as a phoenix rising from the ashes. And the word disappeared for centuries. No one saw it until 1557. Christoph of Armenia wrote a book called The Three Princes of Serendip. Serendip, the ancient name for Ceylon. It's quite a book. If you've never read it, I would highly recommend it. It's a book of three princes with incredible wisdom that they learned through pain, through adventure, through travel. And whenever anyone came to them with a problem, with a disaster, with something that was horrific, what did they do? They said one word, and that word was apocatastasis. And somehow they knew what that word meant. Somehow they understood the word. And somehow every disaster became greatness. Every horror story became the beginning of the climb to the highest mountain imaginable. And the word disappeared for a couple more centuries. Until the 18th century, Horace Walpole, British writer, very good writer actually, wrote the first Gothic novel in history. But what Horace Walpole was especially famous for is writing letters. I don't mean he wrote a letter or two. He wrote thousands of letters. Thousands. And folks, this was not the time you went to your keyboard and you typed in a letter. No, no, no. You took out your quill pen and you wrote for hours and hours. To his friend Horace Mann, he wrote over 800 letters. Horace Mann responded over 800 times. There are barrels in libraries containing the notes between Horace Walpole and Horace Mann. What did they write about? The Three Princes of Serendip. They wrote about apocatastasis. They began seeing it just slightly differently. It was no longer about restitution, renewal, and recovery. Really, it was about when life throws you into hell, how do you climb out? That's what apocatastasis really meant. When you're going through hell, as Winston Churchill put it so brilliantly, keep going. Wally Amos said, when you're going through hell, don't stop and take pictures. Keep going. And so the word disappears again for a couple of centuries. And then it appears in the 20th century in the hands of someone named Walt Disney. Walt Disney loved the word apocatastasis. He loved the feel of the word apocatastasis. When you're writing movies like Aladdin, what word could be better to describe describe the events in a movie like Aladdin, then apocatastasis. But how the hell are children going to pronounce the word apocatastasis? I have a hard time saying the word apocatastasis. How are kids going to say it? So Walt Disney altered it a little bit. And he altered it to abracadabra. That's where the word comes from. In my view, it is magic. Abracadabra, or apocatastasis, really is magic. And I'm going to tell a few stories today, not only about famous people, but all our presenters have had apocatastasis in their lives. This is chosen from my presenters today because it describes their lives perfectly. So let's start with my first story. 1963 was the year. This man was just 20 years old. He was the goalie for Real Madrid. He was one of the best goalies in the world. He was just 20. He was an up-and-coming soccer player that people knew. This is greatness. This is the beginning of greatness. This is going to be someone who will be spoken about for years. He's going to be a multi-millionaire in soccer. He's going to be a tremendous star. And at 20, he felt that way. Can you imagine that at 20 years of age? My life is set. It's perfect. I have everything I want. It's right here. I can feel it. I can touch it. That was his life at that time. So after a victory by Real Madrid, he and his friends went for a joyride. While it was never confirmed, I suspect alcohol was involved. Yes, there was a major accident. Only one of the kids was hurt badly. Unfortunately, it's our hero. When he woke up in a hospital, doctor looked at him solemnly, said, with years of rehabilitation, you may be able to walk normally again. He said, what? I play soccer. Not anymore. You have compression of the spine and neck. You will never play soccer again. 20 years of age, his dream was dead. He fell into a deep depression. Wouldn't you? Dream is over at that age. So bad that the nurse felt so bad for this kid. Her heart was broken. He didn't want to move from his bed. She had no idea what she should do. So on a whim, she bought him a guitar. She didn't even know if he played guitar, and she bought him a guitar anyway. And the truth is, well, he played it a little, but he wasn't very good. She didn't know whether or not he could sing. She had no idea. And in truth, he was in the chorus in high school, but only because his girlfriend was in the chorus. He had no interest in singing. But what happens when you spend a year or two doing nothing but playing guitar every single day? For hours, because you can't walk, you have no mobility. What happens? Answer, you become pretty damn good. What happens if you sing every day for hours? For hours you sing. You don't stop because you have nothing else to do. Answer, you become damn good. That was 1963. That was 60 years ago. And today, every 60 seconds, somewhere in the world, someone is listening to the music of a former soccer star by the name of Julio Iglesias. Apocatastasis. Abracadabra. My first speaker was an executive coach, a very good executive coach. She worked with Fortune 500 companies, getting people under a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry, getting their heads straightened out, getting their work-life balance in order. She was very good at it. She had training in psychology, and she made a name for herself. She had a 6-figure income. Life was good. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. And around 2005, I remember the call I got from Janet Warren. And the call went something like this. I had an epiphany. I had a spiritual awakening. All the suicides at NYU, all the suicides college kids were going through, I can stop it. I know how. I have the means. I have a toolkit. I can stop it. I can light their way. Wow, I was getting excited. I was getting excited about all of this. She's going to change the world. And in 2005, I brought her up there. Les was sitting right where he's sitting right now. And she wowed him. She really wowed him. She had a toolkit. It was going to make a difference in the world. She was on fire. She was excited. Now, she was so excited that her well-meaning but sometimes idiotic family mistook this bit of a spiritual awakening, this excitement, this enthusiasm over changing the world for something that happened to her in 1979 in college. But she had a breakdown. So, for her own good, they called the authorities and said, you got to do something about her. She's losing her mind. Just the way a whole bunch of people would interpret someone with a higher consciousness. So they sent her to Bergen Medical Center. They stuffed lithium down her throat. When she said, I was just here in Wall Street, I just gave a presentation on mental health, they called her delusional with visions of grandeur. No one ever called me. No one ever contacted me. No one ever checked if she was telling the truth. It's unbelievable what happened to her. They were making her catatonic in a cage while she was trying to change the world. If that's not unbelievable, tell me what is. Apocatastasis. Abracadabra. I remember the call I got from Janet when she was in the hospital. I was with my son up in Pennsylvania having a great time at a resort. Oh, by the way, I'm stuck in a cage here in Bergen Medical Center, and they think I'm delusional, bipolar, and I'm out of my mind. What do I do? Well, I'm used to discounting free cash flow. I am not used to telling people what to do with their lives, but in this case, I gave her exactly the right answer. After telling her, getting angry myself that they would do this to her, you know, we're going to sue these son of a bitches, we'll get them. And then I realized, wrong advice. Wrong advice. I said, Janet, you are now making a movie. You are now writing a book about your life. If this happened to you, it's happened to thousands of others, not hundreds, thousands, and perhaps more than that. You're the one who's going to stop this from happening again. From now on, you are a spy in the house of crazy. Now, sometimes I can hit him out of the park. This time I did. 19 years later, we have a docu-series. 19 years later, we have a movie, we have a book, and we have world-changing tools that she is going to bring, and no one is throwing her in a can this time around. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the greatest people I've ever met, Janet Warren.
So yes, 19 years ago, when I presented here in another building, I had no idea that 9 days later, I was going to be in a police car on my way to a law court. No idea. But I went in. I went in compliant. My mother actually called, and it's because she operated on a belief from 25 years before that I was diagnosed manic depressive. But I also had a spiritual awakening at 25, and that happens a lot in the 20s. on to be a corporate success and wound up here. But when I got excited, my mother said, oh my God, that thing's happening to you again. And I remember just praying to God and says, what are we going to do? The police are standing there, my mother's there, and the guidance was to just go in compliantly. And I announced that I am going in, but involuntarily. Once I was in there and all the meds were going, being pumped into me, Stephen was the first person I called. And we held quite a few conversations on the hallway in a psychiatric ward. And I spoke that it's filthy in here. Somebody just defecated on the couch and they're not cleaning it up, so we can't go into the general room. There's not enough food. People are grabbing at food and some of the food is spoiled. So I would be reporting and walking around the ward with a clipboard and a pen because a business colleague brought supplies and Post-its. I set up an office and it was not allowed to have a pen. Nobody. But somehow I got away with it. I walked around every day writing a report, all in Stephen, and things, we have to talk about what you did because things got better. And we started questioning, are my phone calls being taped? Are they overseeing it? We never really got that answer. But as I would be reporting, things did get better. We will hear from my business partner, Dr. Chatlos, who has understood this story, I think over the last 3 years, but also throughout your life. You've studied this. And I actually brought in the research that are presented on Wall Street to the psychiatrist. And what we call is a clinical gaze. Kind of just looks at me like, sure. And I said, but no, look at, you know what the DSM is, Diagnostic Statistical Manual? I brought it in and asked him to treat me under the spiritual religious issues. And I was ignored. He actually said, nurse, increase her lithium. So my meds were increased because I spoke up. But what was cool in a conversation ongoing with Stephen, whether you brought it up or I did, Stephen sent a lawyer in to the psych ward, and in 3 days I was let out. So thank you, Stephen. That is one way to get out. And yes, we did talk about a movie, and that was put in my medical report, also delusional. She thinks she's going to make a movie. We have it written in there as well. So today, in a few moments, I'm going to show you a short clip of the beginning of calling God to the witness stand, which we named back then. And we took it on Friday the 13th, just a few days ago. A woman named Nadine Dennis flew over from the UK to be part of our movie and part of our support. Why? She's a law student in the UK. A number of years ago, her father was put into a psychiatric hospital and misdiagnosed, forced on a variety of meds, and she was fighting to get him out, could not, years and years of fighting. She eventually won a settlement because they discovered they were medicating him wrong and misdiagnosed. Unfortunately, her father passed just a few months after they won the settlement. And they pretty much admitted wrongly diagnosed and wrong drugs. She vowed on that day that he died that she would become a law student or a lawyer to prevent this from happening. She is not an actress, but you're going to see a little bit of Nadine Dennis acting as a demonstration for the movie.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, imagine you were going about your days feeling happy, hopeful, and overwhelmed. But your family are looking at you through the lens of something that happened more than 20 years ago. They're looking at your behaviour like something's off. Without your knowledge, a call is made. That call results in 2 police officers coming to your door where they're telling you that you're going to be going to a psychiatric institution where you'll be committed, diagnosed, and medicated against your will. You go willingly with the police. You've got nothing to hide. You've not committed a crime. Everything will be explained when you get there. When you arrive to that institution, you tell the doctors your story. But they're not listening. They're hearing you, but they're not listening. They meet you perhaps one time, and they've already decided that you've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. One time, and you've now got a psychiatric label that's stigmatizing. How would you feel? Anna Biltmore was telling the doctors that she was an entrepreneur, that she had been on Wall Street pitching to investors. What did they think of that? Delusional. The psychiatrist who was assessing Anna didn't even think to verify the facts that she was giving to him. No call was made to her sponsor to validate the truth. Anna had been on Wall Street. She had been pitching to investors. But now Anna's falling down the rabbit hole. No one's listening to a word she has to say. She has this diagnosis. She's about to be committed for 11 days with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder where she'll be medicated with at least 3 harmful medications. Anna is you and me. Anna represents the thousands of people across the world who have been committed against their will, ignored, diagnosed, and medicated for telling the truth. What we are here to ask is how many people around the world have found themselves in Anna's shoes? How many people have gone through a spiritually transformative experience yet are being treated like criminals, maybe worse than criminals? We are also here to ask how many of these institutions can honestly say that they have their patients' best interests at heart? How many of these institutions can actually say they've made their patients' lives better? Anna was having a spiritually transformative experience that could have been treated, and we will hear from several witnesses to testify what should have been the treatment for this experience. We've got to decide what we are going to do about this. Anna is an innocent victim, and she's been brave enough to come to this courtroom today to share her story. You will hear from the story of Anna Biltmore, and you will question how on earth they were able to get away with this. Thank you. Anna Biltmore was diagnosed as mentally ill for telling the truth. Telling the truth about pitching to investors on Wall Street had her branded delusional. Rather than picking up the phone to Anna's sponsor, Mr. Feldstein, to check the facts about what she'd been saying in that institution, the doctors felt it more important to diagnose her with bipolar disorder. Why? The doctors did their job badly. They gave Anna a psychiatric label instead of listening to her, showing care, support and compassion, taking the time to understand Anna and her situation, rather than jumping straight to the conclusion of she's mentally ill. Anna had a spiritually transformative experience that had the opportunity to have been treated with no medication and not even needed a day in hospital. But Anna was on that hospital ward for 11 days, given a stigmatizing diagnosis of bipolar disorder and treated with at least 3 different medications. This case has put a spotlight on just how low the threshold can be to be committed to a psychiatric institution, diagnosed as mentally ill, and forcibly medicated. Anna has brought this case so we can see she is just the tip of the iceberg here. There are thousands of people who have walked in Anna's shoes, who are being medicated, mistrusted, not honoured, when they should be able to share what they're going through without fear of being branded ill, mentally ill, with a diagnosis that they will carry through to their lives. Medications they don't need that can also potentially harm them. Anna has shown us that this can happen to anyone. It could happen to you, it could happen to me, it can even happen on Wall Street. But Anna has also been gracious enough to show us what can happen when you put your trust in something bigger than yourself. How was it that Anna was able to stay calm, grounded and focused during those 11 days in hospital? Even with the medication she was being given, she had this internal belief in herself. Where did that come from? Even with this stigmatizing diagnosis, Anna was still able to raise a loving, kind, compassionate young man who was an asset to his community, to his friends and his family. And Anna is still on track 20 years later to create a movie to show the world the importance of educating medical professionals on spiritually transformative experiences that are in the DSM. Psychiatrists can use this, they're not using it. Why are they not using it? This is a question we need to find out. Is it because it doesn't result in a medical bill? We've heard from Dr. Kavanagh that if you are correctly given the V code 6289, you could walk out of hospital in less than a day and be given a zero medical bill. We need to question why that's not happening. Now it's up to us to decide. Who are we going to put our trust in when we go through a period of crisis or pain and suffering? We all go through this, but are we going to put our hands in the lives of doctors, where we've seen what can happen to Anna Biltmore? Or are we going to put our trust into something bigger than ourselves? Perhaps we need to look at the US judicial court system for the answer to this. For it is in God that we trust. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
So we'll cover 3 topics as quickly as we can. This movie has a prequel to it called Spy in the House of Crazy, and that's because the patients called me a spy because they said, you're not like one of us. So the movie is a little bit about Cuckoo's Nest, a little bit about 55 Steps with Hilary Swank, a little bit about Barbra Streisand and Nuts, a little bit about Oh God and George Shorns. But it's mostly like Nellie Bly, 10 Days in a Madhouse, because she went in as a journalist to report, and that's what it felt like for me. I'm going to introduce Dr. Calvin Chaplos, if you want to start coming up. We met a few years ago, and the first thing I said to him is, I don't trust you. And I'm like, okay, you're a nice guy. I don't trust psychiatrists. But since then, I have such an amazing appreciation for this man. He has studied and applied the spiritual part of mental health in a very unique way that most psychiatrists don't. He is our business partner, he is an investor, and he's here to speak his story. Welcome.
I don't know if you have any idea the coincidences that are happening today that happened when I met Janet have continued for the last 3 years, and my life has been changed ever since then. I'm an addiction and a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. I've been working in New Jersey since 1985, and the last 30 years, most of my practice has been involved, because I work with addictions, you end up looking at the nature of spiritual experience. Those of you familiar with the 12 steps, it is a spiritual recovery program. And so I studied it, and I began to understand what is happening so that I could understand that Janet did not have a bipolar disorder. She had a true spiritual experience that may become intense if we don't know what it is. And if it continues to get intense, it becomes overwhelming, and it can become psychotic, and you can lose touch with reality, but it is not a mental disorder. My interest in this actually started with an episode of psychosis. I was in my residency training program at Bellevue in New York, and suddenly I wake up and I'm paranoid that I'm going to be killed that day. Fortunately, because I work in the field, because I had colleagues, I did not get hospitalized, and I could have been hospitalized very easily with a first episode of psychosis. So I was fortunate. Since I met Janet, we probably met about 50 people with experiences of spiritual experience, hospitalized repeatedly, and I've said, I'm embarrassed to be part of a system that continues to do that. So when I heard Janet's story, I said, listen, we now have enough knowledge about spiritual experience, especially with what I'm doing clinically, that this should become illegal. And your movie that you envisioned years ago has to happen. This happens so many times, and we want to correct it. Part of my interest in the long run is I have a very good reputation in the field. I'm a Distinguished Life Fellow in the American Psychiatric Association. I'm connected with the World Psychiatric Association. They minimally are recognizing the role of spiritual experience in mental health. That has to change. That has to change. We now have knowledge about how spiritual experience is organized in our minds and in our experience. And we can tap into that to touch what we would call the heart and the soul, and assist in transforming that and literally promoting spiritual experiences. I'm actually going to save some of my comments till later. I think that's probably Janet just found me at Rutgers, where she had initially been hospitalized. And ever since then, things have happened that her coming into my life has had my work become incredibly important, incredibly fulfilling. And I love your beginning. The last couple of years, it's been like magic. And I do want to say some things afterwards to sort of say more about the process that you are actually all a part of today. Thank you.
So we have three things. We have a movie with a prequel, we have a documentary pilot with a series that will happen, and we have a movement. We call it more than a movie, it's a movement. And I invite Marlena to come up here just for a short few minutes. Marlena is part of our global network, who also flew up here this week to help us film. And she speaks from lived experience, but she's also part of the movement. She's an advocate, and we're looking for Marlena to be the voice of the younger group, the 20-somethings, because that's an important voice to get out here. So, Marlena.
Hello everyone, I'm Marlena, and I am 26 years old. I am a musician and artist, and I also have bachelor's degrees in physics and psychology. I currently, however, deliver pizza. When I was 21 years old, I had an experience that landed me in the psychiatric hospital, forcibly medicated, and given a diagnosis of severe bipolar disorder. For the past 5 years, I have been navigating the effects of these different medications, trying to find the right ones and the right dosages. And I still have a lot of really unanswered questions about the spiritual components of my own experience. Luckily, I found Janet in her project, and her mission to make spiritual emergencies aware, to make people aware of spiritual emergencies in the mainstream. I am now coordinating the 20-somethings from around the world to establish a support network and to make our voices heard, to make a positive impact on the mental health system. I would like to see a new standard of care established for people going through these sorts of experiences, whether they are mentally ill or not, a new standard of care, because this is not acceptable for anyone to go through, regardless of their status of having a psycho-spiritual crisis, a spiritual emergency, or mental illness. There's a lot of change that needs to happen to the system, and I think one of the most important components of that is raising collective awareness. A lot of these conversations are happening with professionals, which is great. They're still not happening with professionals in many senses too, which is not great, but also the mainstream is left behind. You know, we are left in the dust of everything happening behind closed doors of professionals, and we want to change that. We want to make people aware of the problems happening in our mental health system and how we can move forward to have an actually good system that actually gives care and does not punish people for going through a crisis. Thank you.
So to close, we'll entertain questions if we have a few minutes, but to close, we do want to make the point that there's been a lot happening in the last 20 years, and there are conferences and books and research and advocates, and we have some of our team going down to Washington, D.C. to change policy. There's great stuff that's happening that was not happening back then. But what's not happening is that it's still not out to mainstream, and that is what we want support for. Investors, philanthropists, celebrity endorsement, collaboration to help us get our movie and material out to mainstream. Do we have a few minutes for another? So I'm just going to show you a short clip of the end of our documentary, and it gives you a quick look at some of the people that we have on our team, and we filmed right here in Central Park for some of this. And I remember praying and calling out to God. I just said, take this pain away, take this fear away. I have no idea how I'm going to function.
I'm Joshua Roberts,
With my master's,
CEO of Inspired Mind Mental Health
literally, this is the moment.
Also a presenter with the nation's largest
Introduced, served on the Connor's Temple. My name is
This can happen to you and you and even you.
No, I won't shed thy tears just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Yeah. Stand by me. Stand by me. When Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? Oh, stand by me, yeah. Stand by me.
The gentleman to the left of me who was not singing is Vesper Moore. He is a world-renowned advocate for improving mental health care. He just happened to show up when we were filming, and so he's there supporting our film as well. So that concludes. We have lots more to share, but we'll talk in film. Do we want to ask any questions now, or? What's
I don't know how your mother
Yeah.
reacted.
Excuse me?
I wonder if your mother ever realized.
No, she passed during COVID, and my family kept it as we can agree to disagree. They would not accept the research. But I figured I'm going to invite them, my sisters, to the opening screening and see what happens. Yeah.
Have you done any research into microdosing of psychedelics at all?
Alvin?
I'm here.
Yes.
I don't do research. I'm aware of it. It is connected with the work that we are doing. The psychedelics open a spiritual part of us that is what we're finding able to be open without psychedelics also. So it's coinciding with our work. That's part of why we think now is the time for this movie, because there will be more and more of an interest as the psychedelics are hopefully becoming approved by the FDA for medical use. So yes, it's on similar.
I want to say a quick comment about the mothers, because we're very dedicated to not blaming our mothers. We have quite a few people where the mothers did put the person into the hospital. And we're going to make a point in the docuseries that the narrative that was fed to America, to around the world, of chemical imbalance, and there's a whole lot of research that the narrative we were fed is not true, and all of the diagnosis. So we are not blaming our mothers for what they did. They have our best interests. So I want to make sure I get that on record. Any other questions, comments?
Just to understand exactly what you're doing, you're making a movie. Where do you intend to distribute the movie?
We are making a movie and a docuseries at the same time because the content and research we need. We're preparing to present to Netflix or mainstream. We want to get this to our mainstream America first.
And you're also trying to contact through Washington. You have an organization that's just trying to spread information beyond the movie, is that?
Yes, the third part of our presentation I'll do in 60 seconds is called AWARE. Are we aware of religious experience in mental health? So we have a whole crew working on the 980 rollout to include the spiritual part of mental health. Dr. Chatlos is very involved in looking to do the training so that the first responders do not immediately put people in the hospital when it's a spiritual experience. And we are looking to improve policy, influence policy, that clergy can be involved in some of that assessment. Anything else? Yeah?
Stephen, could I have
Yes.
3 or 4 minutes? Thank you. Janet's been giving you the introduction of the beginning of our project. I want to say something to you. I know most of you are not investors, but hopefully the investors will be hearing this about what the possibility of this is. There is a problem and it needs attention. Part of our movie will not only just point out a problem, we're going to show the opportunity of true spiritual experience. And I want to carry this further. I want to engage you in the vision that this project only begins. Where we are today and what's possible. And I want you to begin with a question to all of you. What is the ultimate gift that you want to give the world? Not buy, not not sell, not invest, not make money, but to generously, selflessly give to the world. That's why you're here. And anyone want to share or say what the gift is that you want to give to the world? Yes.
My gift to the world would be a moment of love, just to experience that. You never know what a person is going through. So if you could just give a moment of compassion, not just sum it up as love, but that moment can carry a person on to whatever they may be going through.
And that is the foundation of spiritual awakening and spiritual experience. Wonderful. Who else? Yes.
Optimism.
Optimism. Say more.
Well, be optimistic about anything that's negative. It could become positive.
Okay.
And look forward with anticipation on it's going to work out.
And that's part of the abracadabra. But notice we don't all jump in and say, here's what I want to give to the world. There are doubts. Is it not good enough? Is it too big and grandiose and I won't be able to achieve it? Am I embarrassed? Is somebody going to judge it? Is the world even ready? Can it handle it? That vision, that gift, your purpose comes from a spiritual core. That we now have an understanding is wired into us, drives our direction, but somewhere along the way, what has us hesitate with our passionate gift is because something got injured. Our dream got injured, right? And everybody lives like this. This is what the new work is that we're doing. We have wired into us a purpose. And it gets injured, our self-worth, our dignity gets injured, it leads to addiction, it leads to depression, anxiety, trauma, mental illness, spiritual awakenings that get mistreated. We now have the capacity, and I'm working in a treatment program that actually has these spiritual awakenings happen. None of this, your gift, what we envision is going to happen without the beginning awareness that spiritual experience is real, that we can empower, and that it's important. None of our dreams, because they are so passionate, they are so big. You tell someone, oh, I'm going to give them love. Oh, we've heard that before. But when we really look at the nature of spiritual experience, it is a foundation of the most incredible, almost magically empowering, abracadabra love. And we say that word simply, but when we work with addiction, when we work with trauma, when we work with mental health, it becomes real. And all of you have been in love before, right? A spiritual opening is literally like falling in love. Remember the intoxication? That's what she had. An intoxicating spiritual moment when that spiritual core opens to everything that we can find that's even more powerful than our human cortex. And it's overwhelming. So we now know how to engage this, how to manage it, how to direct it. That's the possibility of investing in this, because without the awareness, without the belief that this is real, this is important, and we can empower it, none of this other stuff is going to happen. So we have the knowledge, this is the beginning, any investments will be opening the door and And you as investors, you have a dream, you have a gift, and are you really fulfilling it? This will help create the space. And all of you that are here, Stephen brought you here because of the dream, right? Whatever we can do in what we're producing to have your dream come true, we hope can happen. So please, seriously consider being a part of this, investing in it, because this is the time and this is the place for this to happen. So, thank you.